Hey, it's Coach Sarah, and welcome to Range of Change, the podcast where we dive into the pivotal moments of transformation that shape our lives. If you're looking for inspiration, insights, and real talk about navigating change, big or small, you found the right place. I'm an ICF certified coach and a seasoned change manager with 2 decades of experience helping people and organizations thrive through life's hairy moments. Whether you're choosing to make a bold leap into a new chapter of your life, or life is choosing it for you, this community will explore how to not just survive, but thrive through change. Think of this podcast as your guide to becoming more resilient, more empowered, and ready to take on your next big change with confidence. Now, today's episode is going to be extra special. I'm so excited to welcome my amazing sister-in-law, Alison, to the show. We're diving into one of the biggest change dreams out there, relocating to paradise. You know the one, that vision of packing up, moving to a warmer climate, and living your best life. We have all had that fantasy at some point, right? But often we keep putting it off, thinking someday. Someday when I'm retired, someday when I have more money, someday when the stars align. But as we all know, someday isn't promised. Well, Alison didn't wait for someday. She made it happen, moving from Chicago to San Diego, and today we're going to hear her incredible story of how she took the leap. But before we get into that, I've got to ask my favorite opening question to kick things off. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being fear and loathing and 10 being energized and excited, how do you feel about change, Alison?
Well, first of all, Sarah, thank you so much for inviting me. I am so happy to be here and excited for our conversation today. So on a scale of 1 to 10 for change, I would like to think that I am a 10. I am excited about change. I've definitely moved through a lot of different changes as we all have in our lives. Actually making that change happen, though, that's the sticking point. I'm excited about it, but it takes a little while to get there. So.
Thank you. Yeah, that resistance, that little bug that niddles in and holds you back sometimes.
Yes, like your body's telling you, right? Like you can feel it, like it's coming up in different ways, whether it's anxiety or wanderlust or thinking about it or just those dreams. Like there's something telling you it's time, but figuring out how to actually make it happen and realize what it is, like that part can sometimes take some time. But when it happens, you're like, it's time.
I love that. Yeah. So I want to explore all those ideas with you. Sort of that first urge when you feel like something is wrong, something needs to change, as well as moving through that process of fear and resistance to get to the point where you're having your, oh my God, I did it. I did it. I'm living in my new life. This isn't even a change anymore moment.
Got it. I think, so I was living in Chicago. I'd lived there since my late 20s, had people there that I loved. I originally had moved there for a job, and my brother was there and got to live with him and built this, and my dear friend from high school was there, and so I had this immediate family, and I loved Chicago, and I was there for a long time. And I traveled full-time for work, so I was in and out of O'Hare, and there's a part when you're driving home, when you're driving from the airport in the back of a cab, and you come up to the skyline of Chicago, right? And it's, whether it's night or day, right, it's spectacular. The sun, the stars. And every time I would hit that part of the highway, I was like, I'm home, right? Was so excited. And then there came a time, after being there for a while, it started to fade. And I could tell it was a little wanderlusty. And so that was one of the first, like, oh, it might be, the little signs were starting to happen. And then also realizing I wanted to be out in nature more. That was the other, like Chicago it's a food city. It is, the people that I love were there. There's so many great things about Chicago, but also wanting that time to be outside and outside year round, which you can do. It just requires a lot more clothes, a lot more clothes or driving.
You know, something that once excited you was starting to lose that magic. Was that, you think, the first indication that it might be time after this, entire era of your life? How long were you in Chicago, all told?
All told, it was 22 years, wow, give or take. So it had been a long time. We were military brats, And so had moved around, not as much as some, but we had moved around quite a bit. And then I was traveling full time for work. And I think the other piece was, so military, like moving around quite a bit, and then traveling full time for work. And then also was working, still am working for a consulting firm. And so we did project work, would work really hard. And then a couple times I was able to take these month-long breaks. So do a big project, work a ton, and then took a month off and went to Barcelona for a month and lived, just like got an apartment, tried to sink in. And then another time it was do another long project and then went to Argentina for a month and went there for Grape Fest and stomped on grapes and explored wine country. And that idea, those breaks, I loved those breaks. And so that's also part of that itch, right? Like wanting to explore the world, right? We all do, right? When there's vacation and it just feels so good. And how can you get that feeling in your life more, right? That mix of this is my day-to-day life and then also being part of the bigger world and seeing more and doing more. So I think that was part of what started bleeding into another change, another place to live, more time in nature, and another adventure.
Interesting. So I think that's one of those narratives that I think people tell themselves is, oh, sure, XYZ is great to visit, but do I really want to live there? So I think one way that people might stay complacent when they really are ready to change is to tell themselves a story of everything's fine. I've made things balance out, and on paper, so to speak, it all makes sense, even though your body is telling you something different. But you have something that works, and it's easy to stay in that place. But I do want to just real quickly pivot to the military brat, and you've been moving your entire life, and I'm so curious how that impacts your feelings around moving. I feel like it could go in a lot of different directions if you have a lot of experience with it early in life, like so few of us do.
Right. And so with moving, like in the moment, it is hard, right? There's a period that I've realized happens every time I move where you start, like any change, right? You have to finish something before you can start the next, right? I've heard from different people, like there's something in your brain. It needs kind of that linear stop and start. And so as you're in the military, you're told you're moving, right? So it's clear. So you do that and you start packing up your life and you start saying goodbye and you start having to do that transition phase. And then you move and then you rebuild. In the military, they welcome you, right? Like they know this process. And so people show up with pies and welcome you into the community. And then the more you do it, like anything else, it's a skill. You learn how to reach out to people, how to build new connections, how to explore a city and find new things and find the adventure in it. And that the people, your nuclear family that's with you, right? Like that's your core. And then you're also building out. And once you kind of have that skill, it stays with you for the rest of your life. You can pick up and feel comfortable. You can, I mean, it's still a little odd sometimes, but traveling alone for work or traveling with people and being in different cities all the time, that felt fine. And then you, not a chameleon, but you get excited about reaching out to wherever you are and connecting with people. It's a little awkward, right? You're eating alone in a restaurant and then you just start striking up a conversation with someone and then they start telling you great things about their city. And it's a skill about building connection and being excited about it. And so that was kind of my childhood growing up. Then it became my professional life doing it. And now getting older, right, when you've got less of that structure around, in college, it's easy to make friends, right? You're living with them. And then now as an adult, like you have to reach out, right? Like you've moved, I've moved, like you have to figure out what the things are that you love in your life, how you're going to connect with people through those so that you get to have a full life wherever you are and build those communities.
Nice. So I get the impression then that, this is a strength that you had from your youth. This is a set of skills that you built young and early. But these are a set of skills that anyone can learn, they can adopt, they can adapt, they can fake it till they make it.
Absolutely. I used to say, now that I'm not traveling anymore for work, I used to be able to pack a suitcase. I mean, 15 minutes, right? Like you get out the door. Now it's like this whole, we have a phrase and it's called pack like a jerk. And truly, I mean, everything, I don't know what I might need. And I just start throwing things in. And then I'm now officially an amateur traveler. I am. That skill is dusty. So, yeah, just like practicing anything, it's something that I'm grateful for. I look at people that have lived in one place their whole life and been surrounded by their extended family, and I believe in that idea that it takes a village to raise people, to have dog, like the whole thing you need. It's all of that connective energy and support. And I do wonder, I'm like, what would that be like, right? Because that is another set of skills, right? Like navigating a family of 20 people all the time and big holiday dinners and things like that, which are things that I don't have particularly skills with. And my brother and I were the youngest in the family, right? So I haven't spent a ton of time with little kids. So when my friends started having babies, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. Right? And so it's just whatever our life experiences is, right? Like it's thrown at you and then you take it. And then if you can continue with it in your life and shape it, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but.
Yeah, I think it's great the way that you have embraced your strengths, and also that just because it's a skill that you had, it doesn't mean that it's easy every time you reach out in an awkward moment to have a connection with a stranger or to try to make a friend. It's always going to be a step outside of your comfort zone, but one that I'm sure as we finish this story, we will hear has had great rewards for moving yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And for you, because you weren't a big mover, right? Mm-mm. When you were younger, was that something that was attractive to you? The idea of moving, or was it?
Yeah. I mean, I've always had wanderlust, so I've always wanted to explore everywhere. And I also struggle at my core with the idea of a door closing. So I kind of want like 1,000 feet in one of them in each area. So it's like, I might do this, I might do that. Like, so the idea that you mentioned that in the military, there's an ending. They say you're going, and there's a whole period process that you can go through of transition is very attractive, because I think, at least for me, that's the part that I struggle with, is the natural closure of something as I'm embarking on something new, instead of like keeping like that one finger like on the chess piece where it's like, I'm not sure if I want to move it there just yet.
Well, and to that point, it's different now, right? With, it used to be staying in contact with people meant paying for long distance phone calls or actually sitting down and writing a letter and all of those, which I was not great at doing that. Fortunately, I had friends that were good at writing letters and staying in touch. I was not, but now it's so easy, right?
Yeah.
I would say our family is really good about hopping on a plane. Doesn't matter, right? Well, if there's an invitation, we'll hop on a plane. It doesn't need to be just you're in the town, so you're invited to the party. There's a party, we will show up, and calling and FaceTiming. And I think we really figured that out during COVID, mm-hmm. when we were not able to go see each other as much. And then we started FaceTiming, and then I realized I was actually seeing you and connecting more with you during COVID than we were pre-COVID. So I think it is possible now to, especially in the idea of moving, right? But we all have these different groups of people that are all over, and we just stay connected in different ways, which I think also now can make it easier to move, and you can always move back, right?
Right.
There's that story, people leave after college, then eventually they come back. So
yeah, you can always come home again, unless the phrase is you can never come home again. But I do believe you can always go back. And I think
right.
We've all had some version of that experience, because not every change is immediately successful. Not every venture ends up being everything we thought it would be. And the knowledge that you can just step right back and find the space that you had while you reevaluate and figure out what's your next move. It might be to stay there. It might be to continue pivoting.
Yes, and thinking about not necessarily not being a failure, right? But if it's not the right fit, you can change, right? It's not, I think when I was younger, everything was, it needs to be I want to change jobs. It needs to be the perfect job, or I want to move. It needs to be the perfect location. And now this sounds like a great idea. Let's try this on, see how it fits. And there isn't just one answer. I think there's 1,000 answers, and you can find something that's really solid and make it work in a lot of different situations. Relationships, jobs, like all aspects of life.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a big sign of maturity, because I see that as I'm getting older and most people in my life are getting older, but also, the babies that I once held are now teenagers. You can see these changes. I can see younger versions of me and my sister, my cousin, and my nieces now. And certainly I'm seeing versions of, what I recall of mothers and aunts and myself. And the thing that I see everyone doing these days that I'm really grateful for is letting go of some of the perfectionism and just accepting that things can be different than I wanted them to be or how I thought they were going to be, that there's so many different variations of great. And sometimes the great that you never wanted or even knew about was exactly the one you needed.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I have gotten that whole thing they talk about wisdom with age. It's something that you really can't get until you actually go through all that experience. And when people say, what would you tell your younger self? I'm like, my younger self wouldn't have listened. My younger self thought it all had everything figured out. And so now it's finally, I feel like I'm a little bit more open to taking in the information.
Right. No, I'm with you. All right. So I took us way off course. So
okay.
You were starting to contemplate that Chicago might not be the place that you needed to be anymore after having loved it for more than 20 years.
Yes. And so through those 2 trips that I had taken, the months living out of the country, I loved those. And started talking to other people about sabbatical. So the company that I worked for used to have a sabbatical, which was, I think, maybe 3 months or something like that, or some short amount of time, 10 weeks, something like that, where you, after a certain amount of time, you could take a paid sabbatical and do whatever you want, and then you could come back to your job. And so in software consulting, like there's definitely, as with many careers, right, burnout, right? And so do that, and you could go study, you could go travel, you could sit on your couch, whatever you wanted to do. And that was in my 20s when that had been a possibility. It's long gone. But once someone plants an idea in your brain, which is the thing, right? If someone tells you the idea of something great, and it's with you, right? So when we talk about modeling for children, just letting them see the possibility of what their future could be, or career dreams, anything, right? Like if you plant a seed, so that seed has been in the background for a while. I'm like, sabbatical. And then an ex-boyfriend had taken a 6-month sabbatical, and just this amazing motorcycle trip. And when you see someone that you know, and then you're hearing about this sabbatical, you're like, oh, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. And so fast forward, I started thinking about a sabbatical, and then start to finish, it took, I feel like, about a year to actually make it happen. And in my, you go through 3 months, you're like, why not 6 months? Why not a year? So I asked, and in that moment, asked for a shorter period, 3 months, and I talked to work about it. And so one of my favorite parts about my sabbatical was before my sabbatical, when I asked my boss and I told him, I have this dream. I have this dream of going and doing things now in my life that I might have waited till retirement, but I'd like to start doing them now. And go on a road trip with my little dog, hike the national parks. And he said, absolutely. And right, because, and then from there, everyone starts telling you their dreams about where they want to travel, what they want to do, if they had time, resources, whatever it is to go on a big adventure. And I love these stories, right? I gobble these stories up, right?
Yes.
And then you see people's eyes light up and you're like, and then they're like, oh, I wish I could do it. And I'm like, I'm telling you that you can. And so that lead up was pretty spectacular. So it was my energy and then all this other energy and seeing other people having done it. You're like, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, I love that, because I think there's a lot of people that would have said, oh, well, we used to have this program and it's gone now and poor me, too bad. And there's nothing wrong with saying, this is what I really want to have happen. Why don't I try to make it happen? Like, the odds might be against me. They might say no. They might say, maybe let's talk about it. And like you said, it took you a full year to prepare in all sorts of different ways. I'm sure one of those ways being figuring out exactly how your absence would be covered at your job. But you had a dream and you went through the steps to make it happen.
Absolutely. So a transition, when you're telling someone your dream, you also need a transition plan for them, right? To support the people that are ultimately at work, for example, going to be taking on the load, whether it's family, if you're going to go on an adventure and there's kids, people are going to be helping cover for you. And the great thing, someone else said, oh, okay, this is going to be hard, but you are clearing the path for me to do this next, right? Like I have this dream that I want to take an extended trip and do this adventure with my partner. And then you're like, yes, right? And so it's this, you start creating the possibility and then people can see it and they're like, okay, I will support your dream. And then I'm going to be asking for your support in my dream. And that's all, right? Like that's what we're here to do is help each other out and realize these dreams. And I think the other thing, so there's the wanderlust component, and then there's also this idea of I'd like to live now. Rather than waiting until I retire, I would like to do all of these things now, even if it means I'm working longer into life, because I love hiking and I love yoga and I love being out in nature. And so all of these things, I mean, even realizing now, like it's starting to hurt a little bit more on my body. And I'm like, well, it's not going to be better in 20 years.
Yeah.
So do it now. And so setting all of these things are starting to come together. Like how do I live my life in a way that's supporting being in nature, allowing me to travel more, doing more things that I thought were bucket list items for later, but in fact, they're bucket list items in my life. And so let's work but also live really big while we're doing it, which like that's even come more, I think, post the sabbatical. It's gotten clearer because again, I'm planting all these seeds in my brain. I'm like, well, this is how I want to live. So let's do it.
Oh, it's so wise, because I think we so often get focused on the destination and not the journey. So when I retire, and we all have those anecdotal stories of when I retire and, something tragic happens the day after retirement. Like we've all heard some variation of you just can't, none of it's guaranteed, but right now is, and building a life that you love each and every day is where the real magic is. There's nothing that's going to happen when I retire that's ever going to beat loving every single day.
Absolutely. And a friend has a phrase that she had taken on, and it was, we may have to strike this. I don't know if she can. So it was the idea of making yourself great. So for me, it would be make Allie great. You're already doing great, but let that be the plan on how you live. Like going for great, right? Like there are times when, we're just kind of head down dealing with things, but trying to finding other things in your life that bring you joy. And so I think someone had said, I can't think of what, maybe it was Mel Robbins, the idea of if you're tired and you're exhausted, rather than taking something away in your life, add something in that is bringing you joy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have found that if I look at my time, I probably have more time than I think I have if I'm conscious about how I'm spending my time and adding in more joy into my life and thinking about living that way. So I'm blanking on an example right now.
Well,
totally
what about
lost my train of
yeah,
thought.
yeah. So
Pick me back.
you mentioned outside of the podcast to me that you've joined this hiking club and you've made a lot of friends and you're connecting with them outside of the hiking club, and that might be a great example of I'm tired. I work such long hours, but I'm going to add hiking.
Right, and so it was a story that I was hearing. I had gone back last year and started an integrative wellness coaching program, and so we're doing the coaching sessions with our peers as practice, and then I ended up connecting, because of my time zone, with a lot of people from LA that had moved during COVID, and apparently all these people had moved to California and were trying to build connections, and they joined yoga studios, which I had done, and met lovely people in San Diego in the yoga community, and then through hiking. And so it ended up being, because of that transition period with COVID where there was so much movement, there were a lot of people that were that relocated and looking to reconnect, looking to build new connections, right? So it seemed like an even bigger amount of people like reaching out. And so was able to meet some really great people through Meetup and my local YMCA, like these great groups of people that were just really outgoing and kind of, when someone will just pull you in, which is so fantastic, which is something that I try to do as well. I love, much like I love you, like people with wanderlust, people, right, that want to travel and are excited about new experiences and doing things that make them a little uncomfortable, right? It was, I think, when we were in Scotland over the summer and we took mass transit somewhere, we were like, this is the sign of a good traveler, someone that can navigate mass transit across the pond.
Yes. And be energized by it.
Right? The thrill, you're like, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but eventually we'll make it there.
Yeah.
Eventually we'll make it there.
Masquerade as a local. I love it.
Trying to fit in.
Awesome. So let's finish connecting the dots. So you negotiated a sabbatical, and that ended up with you moving all the way to San Diego.
Yeah. So the dots on this, I'm sure so many people, right, have crazy COVID stories. So in late 2019, I was visiting a friend in San Diego with a group of friends. We go on an annual trip, and we were together, and I realized if I'm going to go on a sabbatical, I work remotely, so that also is great flexibility. I should come work remotely in San Diego and do that for a couple months, then start my sabbatical. So I'd kind of start transitioning into the idea of being somewhere warm and being out in nature more. And so my lease was up in Chicago, so I packed everything up, put it in a storage unit in downtown Chicago. And then in March of 2020, which was a key date, if we all remember the start of COVID.
Oh,
so
boy.
Right before COVID started, I had rented a place and had been settling in. I'd been in San Diego for 5 days, and my friend that lived there called and said, they've just started lockdown. I'm coming to pick you up. We're going shopping. And so what, kind of like Gilligan's Island, what started as a 2-month tour stretched out, right? Because COVID kept extending, and I had been living in downtown Chicago, and things were cold and rough in downtown Chicago. With the riots, with COVID, there was a lot of struggling. People and my friends in Chicago were like, you're in a good place where you are right now, right? Because in San Diego, you can be outside year round, right? So
yeah.
Like most places, right? We were all just outside. I was fortunate. I was near the beach, so I was going to the beach with my little dog every day and started tuning in more to nature, right? Like sunrise, sunset, you're at the beach, you're out walking, started noticing the tides and trying to find when it's low tide so you can go explore at the beach, and watching the moon and going on full moon hikes and things like this. So I had moved from this very city-focused life to this very kind of outdoor, simple life, which also, right, like COVID, we kind of, everything got really small. And I was super fortunate that my small included, I was in a very fortunate to be in a space where I could be outside. I had a secure job because I was working remotely. Had a friend nearby, so was connected. I had a great pod of people, and I was close with my family, FaceTiming. So it was a time of transition, and was super fortunate that I was able to kind of turn it into a positive change, right? Because it is one of those moments. It was one of those moments, and a lot, right? Like we started challenging the way that we were living our lives, right? Like be at home, have more dogs, rescue more dogs, and spending time with family and living more simply. And that was, I think, also, like, I am an anxious person. I run anxious and have struggled with that all my adult life. And there are certain things, being in nature and having more quiet time, things that kind of calm me down. My yoga practice, my meditation practice, all of those things help a ton. But it's also was in contrast with living downtown Chicago and biking in the city and all the sounds and everything, and then moving into this quiet space. So I kept getting stuck. I kept staying in San Diego, and then COVID had kind of picked back up, but September 2020 decided it was time to go on my sabbatical. It was kind of supposed to be a little break. I think COVID was expected to surge like at the end of the year when things started getting colder. So 3 months, bought a car, didn't have a car in Chicago. So I'm like, get a car and pack up the dog. I used to blame like half the car was full of the dog stuff and maybe it still was, but, and then to go hike around the national parks. And so back to the change component, right? So had been prepping, like, so work, everybody knew it was coming. And so we had plans, and the people that I work with, the people on my team, everyone was super supportive and completely just, it was amazing. They just stepped up and took over. And so eternally grateful for them, right, to create that space. And then my friends, my pod that was there in San Diego, like they sent me off and got me all prepared with all of the crazy things that you never knew you might need being in a car for 3 months. Like the string up laundry thing so you can dry your clothes,
right,
and the car vacuum, and like all of these crazy things. So I get ready to go. And I'm trying to remember if I had, how much of this had I talked with you guys about before I left?
Quite a bit. Like, I do remember getting, like the sat phone number and stuff. Like, yes. So, I think that your preparations were exceptional, for the sabbatical itself, because you were a single woman going out into the wilderness for extended periods of time. So that was really wise. And even the sabbatical as a step towards your, eventual future in San Diego is amazing preparation. But I'm also struck by the resilience, because in March of 2020, like, you didn't have a crystal ball. You didn't know what was about to happen, and you rolled with it. Like, I remember, making decisions and trying to figure out if you should stay, if you should go back to Chicago. What about my storage unit? What should I sign a lease? Like, it was such a tumultuous time to find yourself far away from your community of 22 years. Even though you had a community, it's smaller, it's different. The resilience I think that you shown in that time not only speaks to, I'm sure, like a core understanding that that's where you were meant to be for the next chapter of your life, but also just your ability to roll with changes and pivot as necessary and just keep on trucking.
Thank you. Let's see. So September 2020. So I had preparing for change, right? So work is covered. They stepped up beautifully. My mom was definitely very nervous about me going. I get a satellite phone, and which that was recommended to me. All the people I had talked to help prep me for all the things that you never would know, right? So that idea of, if you want to do something, talk to people that are doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they will give you information that no one else, right? Your family and your friends can champion for you, but they may not necessarily know what it is, what you're doing, right? So I talked to a lot of people on sabbatical, and I had been going through the national parks in the Southwest. I'd been in Nevada and Utah, and then it was COVID, right? And then I was like, well, if I'm already San Diego and I'd made it to Colorado, my people are in Chicago, my people are in Madison, they're in Missouri. Why not take this opportunity, because I haven't seen my family because of COVID in so long? So I kept going,
Yeah.
right? And so made this kind of halfway across the country world tour, and I'm going to start crying soon, right? But I got hugs from people, right?
Yep.
Got to see all my people. And in those moments, right, when you're challenged, people are getting sick and there is so much loss. And that's when you're like, of course I want to go on an adventure and live my big life, but I also really want to see the people that I love. And so that was actually one of because of the timing of what was happening, it was such a great part of my trip. Coming to see you guys, I'm taking COVID tests every time, trying to be super safe. I leave, I take a COVID test. I get there, I take a COVID test. And my little dog's just trucking along with me. And it was, and then somewhere during the middle of my sabbatical, I realized I want to be in San Diego. I love these people, and we can travel, and they will fly, I will fly. And I was like, I'm going to stay. And I called my friend Amy, and I was like, I found a place. Will you go look at it? So she's FaceTiming me this apartment. She's like, I think this will work during COVID. It's good. And kind of kept going, but then eventually just had this stuff shipped out from Chicago and started the next chapter. It was planned, it was chaos in the world, it was coincidence, it was a lot of things all, once you put it out, I'm a huge believer, once you put it out there, the universe will start opening doors for you, and if you listened, they will start falling in place for you. So
Oh, I'm so glad they did. And I'm so glad you're very happy in San Diego now.
I am so happy. I am out in nature. It's a great place. People are living there. They are living their best lives out there. Being able to be outside and be in nature, it's pretty fantastic.
Alison, I'm very happy for your happy story, and I'm so grateful that you came onto the podcast and shared it with all of us. It's a fantastic story. You're truly inspirational. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed our conversation. Come see me in California.
Oh, I can't wait.